everyone, how's it going? Welcome to today's installment of Mike's Vehicle Vlogs. I want to thank you for joining me today. So today we're going to do a bit of a storytelling vlog today. Not much going on outside today. It's very hot out. I'm pretty sure it's over 90 degrees today. Oh, it's close. 87. But it's supposed to be over 90 today. The sun is out in full force. I'm not doing anything out there today. So, we're going to do, every once in a while, the storytelling vlog style where I sit here at the desk in a poorly lit office for video. And I'm going to come up with a topic to talk to you guys about today. So, in the past, if you're not really familiar with my vlog series, in the past I have made videos of every single car that I have owned since the time that I've gotten my first car, up until my current car, on top of that, I've also gone through and I've talked about all of the cars that my family has had, any car that I've grown up with, that I have some sort of memory or physical documentation or owner's manual or anything, in regards to that. So I've talked about those. I've even gone as far as ranking, done a couple of ranking videos with those as well. So today I was thinking, why don't we talk about the cars that I could have had? That's right, I have a pretty extensive list of cars that I have come very close to purchasing at one point or another in my life. I'm actually really surprised that I remember most of these. Now, I don't remember a whole lot of things, with these cars. So, when I go to talk about each car, it's probably going to be pretty short, because obviously it's a car that I didn't buy. But with a lot of these, there's something about a lot of these that I do remember, either the reason why I chose not to get these, or it might have been, there's a lot of them here that were just, kind of out of my price range at the time. But, for the most part, I do remember all of these, and I remember about the time frame that I was, kind of interested in said vehicle as well. So let's just start off. Let's go all the way back to the year 2004. And I still had my first car at the time, which was my 94 Pontiac Sunbird LE Coupe. In April of 2004, I was involved in an accident where a vehicle ran a red light, T-boned me from the side. Insurance company totaled out my car, but I bought the car back for, I think it was $87. So I kept my Sunbird, and I was still able to get a damage check from the insurance company. So with that said, it was time to go car shopping again, because at the time my mom was actually using my car also. We only had the one car in our household. The Windstar minivan that we had, the engine in that thing, it was pretty much done. The engine was toast. It knocked for a long time. So we were literally down to just one car, and that was my Sunbird. So we took the opportunity to buy a second car, and like I said, we went car shopping. So I remember we went to this little car lot where my 1992 Pontiac Bonneville was sitting for sale. The first car that I looked at this place was the Bonneville, and I was immediately attracted to it, just because, for one, it's a Pontiac. For two, it looked really freaking nice. It was clean, and it was a beautiful car, and everything in the car was like powered. It was a great car. Drove the car, loved how the car drove, but didn't settle on that one right away. So at this particular car lot here, there were not one but two Ford Contours. And for those of you who don't know what the Contour was, through the mid I'm pretty sure it was made from like the mid 90s to the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. I don't think it lasted all that long, but it was a small 4-door sedan from, you know, Ford. And there were two of them that I looked at. One of them was white with red interior. I vaguely remember the red interior. And another one was silver. I don't remember the exact years of these, and I don't remember any specific trim levels or anything, but I remember one of them was a 4-cylinder model. The other one was a V6, and the one with the V6 had more bells and whistles. I remember it actually had like a remote key fob, so keyless entry and all that stuff. Whichever one was the 4-cylinder had a little less to choose from, but I drove them both. And other than the fact that they were kind of small, you know, like it was a really small car. One of them had a really rough shifting transmission, so pretty sure that was the reason why we kind of dipped out on those. But I remember liking one of them better than the other. I probably liked the one with the V6, but again, it also came down to the price. But one of them was, you know, probably, you know, too much out of pocket with, you know, what we were getting from the insurance company. And the other, you know, like I said, one of them had a bad transmission, or felt like it was going to end up with a bad So we just kind of, you know, completed those test drives there and decided, you know, we weren't going to do any of the Ford Contours. So I remember after a little while, you know, instead of, you know, going from place to place to place, I decided to look in the newspaper because yes, the you know, the newspaper classifieds were still a thing way before Craigslist and all that stuff. So I would look through the paper, and there was one particular car in the newspaper that caught my interest. That was fairly local. So I got a hold of the guy, and me and my mom went to meet up with him at this, you know, location. It was on some sort of farm property, I remember, but it wasn't too far from where we were. But anyway, this was a 1994 Pontiac Grand Am. It was an SE. It was a 4-door coupe, and it was a really dark green color. It was almost like an olive green or something like that. So yes, I came close to buying a Grand Am even back then. But this being like an SE, it was very, very similar to the Grand Am that my aunt had way before, you know, the 5th gen that she had. Her first Grand Am was a 93 black coupe. You know, it had the 3300 V6, very nice car. And she had that for 7 years, and then she upgraded to the 2000 Grand Am GT Coupe, which obviously, well, with me, the story's history, you know. That's where it all began for me. But yeah, so I almost came close to buying this. I drove this one. I remember it had the quad 4-cylinder engine in it, and for the most part, like I said, I don't remember the mileage on it. I do remember with this one in particular, the turn signals did not work. When you would flick the lever for the turn signal, the bulb just stayed on. It didn't click or flash or do anything. You hit the lever, the light just stayed on. So you would have to manually do it. And I remember the guy, you know, when we were driving, he was like, oh yeah, it just needs a new flasher, you know. And at the time, I didn't know what that was gonna entail, you know. But I think he was asking for a little more than, you know, what that car was actually worth. It was a pretty clean car though. It was pretty, I don't remember seeing any rust on the outside anyway. But like I said, in 2004, this was a 94. It was a 10-year-old car. So it was really nice. But we were having, you know, it came down to negotiation. He wasn't willing to go down to, you know, what we were able to afford, you know, at the time. So that's why we passed up on that. And eventually, after a couple of weeks, we ended up going back to the little side lot. The 92 Bonneville was still there, and it was at the perfect price point for what we were able to get, from the insurance company. So that's why we went ahead and bought that. So my mom drove that Bonneville for, a short time. She really didn't like it. So eventually we ended up finding another car for her that summer, which was the 96 Chevy Lumina. And I ended up with the Bonneville because in a way I didn't want to give that car up. And my first car, my Sunbird, was slowly dying by the end of the summer of '04. So I kind of had to resort to buying the Bonneville as, my main transportation. And by pretty much by the end of 2004, the Bonneville was my main car, while the Sunbird refused to start for months and months and months, and that's why I ended up junking that one. But the Bonneville ended up getting a broken brake line in the spring of '05, and nobody was willing to touch the brake lines on that car. So I wanted to have it fixed, but everybody was like, no. So it basically was coming down to the point where maybe we should car shop again. So I remember going with my cousin to look, he kind of had some suggestions. We went to a Ford dealership, and I looked at, and this would have been so cool if I could have pulled this off, because you guys know I have a sweet spot for these. But I did look at one, and even then at the time it was still unfeasible. I don't know why I looked at it, but I did it anyway. A 1999 Jeep Grand Cherokee Limited. This was a beautiful tan or gold Grand Cherokee Limited, and it had the tan leather interior. It was all, fully loaded. I do not remember how much they were asking for, but I remember this particular Grand Cherokee was well over 100,000 miles already, and even though it was all, fully loaded and stuff on the inside, heavily worn. Obviously the leather seats, they were all cracked and such, which, no big deal really. Nowadays I wouldn't have cared, but yeah, I didn't get to drive it because I knew for a fact, I was 18 and I just had my first job. I just started working. There's no way I'd be able to, get any major loan or anything for this, this car, and they were still asking a whole lot for it anyway. So had to pass on that, but I did look at a Grand Cherokee. That thing would have been a gas guzzler too. That would have been really hard to maintain. It had the 4.7 V8 in it, which was new for the 99 year. I think it was called the PowerTech. So yeah, the gas mileage on that would have been awful, but just I was close to, considering a Grand Cherokee at that point. And yeah, it was not feasible. So my cousin and I ended up going back to another one of those little side lot places, and there again was another Pontiac Grand Am sedan. This one was either a 97 or a 98, because I remember it had the updated front fascias, it had the updated interior. I keep wanting to say it may have been, I think it was an SE, but a part of me also wants to say it was a GT, but I don't know. And it was a maroon, so I don't really see a GT being maroon, or a dark red. Maybe it was, but for the sake of the video, I want to say it was an SE. So this one, again, it was well over 100K. It was, kind of closer to maybe what I could afford, and the test drive didn't last too long. It was, once we had the car on the road and started hitting bumps, there were like electrical things going on, particularly like the radio, the display started flickering and going in and out, you know, and even with the gauges and stuff, like everything after a while started to kind of flutter and just started acting weird with bumps. So the car obviously had electrical issues. Looked inside the center console, and there was like mold growing at the bottom of the center console. So my cousin and I started putting the idea together that maybe the car has been flooded and we should stay away from this one. So the air conditioning didn't work also, so we put all 4 windows down. And I remember when we were pulling back into the lot to return the car, I went to go put all the windows up, and the back windows would not go back up. Like they were cutting in and out pretty badly, and it got to the point where they were just stuck down, so we just kind of walked away from that one. So yeah, that's another Grand Am that I almost bought, but I did not. So then after a few days, you know, we went back to one of the other car lots. This one happened to be owned by a mechanic shop, and I saw on the front there that there was a 1999 Kia Sportage and it was green, and you know, part of me is kind of doing the whole, you know, the SUV thing. I kind of want, you know, an SUV type thing. This seemed like a perfect size because the 99 Sportages were very compact, you know, very small, had a little 4-cylinder engine that powered them, spare tire thing on the back, which, you know, was kind of neat to me back then. And, you know, I drove this one. We went for a test drive. This one had all-wheel drive also. It had the little shifter, you know, for the transfer case and all that stuff. So this one was actually looking pretty promising. You know, the guy, I had a family member who was willing to lend me some money to buy a car, you know, so this one was really close to, you know, what I was, you know, being offered, you know, as far as, you know, money wise. So this one was right there, man. I drove this thing. I liked it for the time. It felt, you know, pretty comfortable, you know, for, you know, what it was, and everything in it worked, and it ran nice, and it just seemed like a cool car to have, you know, at the time. So yeah, I was like this close to committing to that one. And the only reason why I didn't commit to that one is because the owner of the shop was out doing some kind of errand, and his son, who was one of the mechanics at the shop, said he was going to be back in like 15 minutes. If you guys want to hang out, you know, you guys can work out a deal or sign your papers and stuff. So, you know, while we were there, it was like a really hot day, you know, in July of '05, and there, you know, a couple of cars down from this Kia Sportage that I pretty much just said I wanted was this 1999 Oldsmobile Alero GL. And, you know, I just kind of was walking around it. The key was in it. The key was actually in the ignition. So I kind of hopped in it, started it up, and I just wanted the air conditioning, really. I wanted to see if the air worked, you know. And had nice cold air conditioning, and I'm like really looking around this car, and I'm like, this car's gorgeous, you know. And you know, sure enough, I was kind of like, you know, can I drive this one? So he gave me a plate for the back, and I drove that one, you know, for, you know, 10-15 minutes around the neighborhoods, and that pretty much, that's what got me off of the Sportage, was the Alero. I took it back to that shop, and you know, I knew it had the V6 engine, obviously, and I was like, this is it, you know, I gotta have the Alero. So that's, like I said, it was that close. I was that close to getting a Kia, but the Alero obviously caught my attention a lot more, and I'm so glad that I made the decision to buy the Alero over that Sportage. Not saying that the Sportage, you know, I don't know. I mean, it may have crapped out earlier. I don't know. Like I said, it was actually really nice, really, you know, cozy little SUV. I probably would have had fun with it if I had had it, but the Alero was obviously a lot more fun, and the fact that it drove a lot like the Grand Am of that generation, and it was just a beautiful looking car. I have no doubt in my mind that I made the better choice. Plus, that car lasted a whole 10 years with me, with my brothers. It had almost 200K on it before it went to the scrapyard. So, yeah. So that was definitely a good choice there, and I'm glad that I went with that one. I have a, more so back then, but I had a problem, like an impulse need for another car. That's pretty much why I drove the Alero for only like 2 years out of the entire 10-year ownership. And part of me wishes I hadn't given that car up so soon, but I did give it to my brother, and it needed to serve him well, because the Lumina blew up. He was driving the Lumina, so the Lumina blew up, and yeah. So I mean, it's not like I did it just to do it, but there have been times where I just impulsively want something else. So in between, or as I had the Alero, I probably had the Alero for a year. I drove past a Chevy dealership, and they had a 2003 Grand Am sedan, and it was the dark gray color. And this color was, it's a beautiful color. It may have not even been, I keep wanting to say 03, but I don't know if this color was out in 03. It might have been, but I don't know. It could have been in 04. Like I said, I'm a little fuzzy with the years, but I just remember it being the dark gray. And it was a more upscale SE trim. It might have been, I think they had like different levels, like SE1 or SE2. But it had the chrome wheels on it, and the CD player, just a whole bunch of stuff, and of course I saw that car, and I'm like, now I want that car. So I remember asking my mom if she'd be willing to go with me to look at this car, and maybe even help me co-sign a loan type thing, because I still don't really have any existing credit at this time. I'm only 19. So she kind of like humored me, went along with it, and we went and looked at this car, and yeah, it was like near perfect. I don't remember the mileage, but I mean, it was another Grand Am that I possibly could have had, and again, it was kind of close, but couldn't get a loan for it. Even with my mom as a co-signer, they said that I was, still kind of a risk, because, I'd only been like working for a year, so I hadn't really built up anything yet, which is totally understandable. But I was kind of devastated by that one, and I shouldn't have been, because, it's basically, I had the Alero, and the Alero was like my Grand Am, so I think the only reason why I wanted the actual Grand Am was because it just looked good, looked really good in that color, and it had the chrome wheels, and it still had the V6, and it was, it was the Grand Am. But, there again, it was like one of those impulsive things, and I drove the Alero for about another year before I decided, I should give this car to my brother. I'll find something else. So now we move into, early 2007, and at this point, when the Lumina is just running on like 4 out of the 6 cylinders at this point, it's really starting to die. I thought, maybe I can find an SUV, because I've been wanting some sort of SUV. So the Pontiac dealership had a new, the Pontiac Torrents came out, and those were the replacements for the Aztec, and of course there was a Chevy version called the Equinox also. So I don't know, I went to this Pontiac dealership one night, and it was pretty late. I wanted to drive one of these. Now, it didn't necessarily mean that the one that I drove, that I wanted, because this one was brand new at the time, and I kind of figured there's no way this is gonna happen. But a salesman did let me go on a test drive with it, and it was very snowy. I remember it being really snowy for this test drive, but this one was pretty nice. I did like how it drove, it being This one I think was red, and it was just very nice on the inside, and I really, really liked it. But there again, you know, it's new. These haven't really been out for a while, so, you know, I kind of put that on the back burner. Before I left, I came across an Aztec, and this, I guess, is technically the first Aztec that I was interested in, but not interested enough. You know, I was kind of like, I've heard, you know, the bad things about the Aztecs, you know, all the problems that they have, you know. At this point, they quit making the Aztec, but there was a red one, and I want to say it was a 2002, and it was, yeah, it was red. It looked really nice. You open the door, and this is the part where I kind of want to kick myself for not committing to this particular Aztec. This one had the rare red accented interior, and I was able to find a picture here. Looks like there's one currently for sale on the Barrett-Jackson website. But yeah, this particular Aztec had these red accented seats, and I remember at the time I was kind of like, I don't like it. There was too much red. The car itself was red. The inside has a lot of this red stuff all over. But, you know, I started it up and, you know, kind of sat there with it. Didn't drive it. Did not drive this one. The dealership was getting ready to close. So I just kind of got to, you know, explore the features that it had. And other than the fact that it had the red seats, you know, there was really nothing else special about it. It was just, you know, your pretty standard Aztec. So yeah, that could have been. I could have had one of those. Unfortunately, I did not take that one. So now, you know, a few days or maybe a week later, I'm back to looking at some cars. I went to a Chevy dealership, you know, next town over, and they had a gold Chevy Equinox on the front line that was used. It was either an 05 or an 06. I don't remember the exact year. This one I did drive, and it had, again, it kind of had the tan interior, and, you know, it's weird because, like, you could just kind of tell at this point I'm just kind of grabbing at things, because why would I want tan? Tan would not be my first pick for a daily car, you know. But I just, you know, whatever. I saw it. I thought maybe it was possible. I remember this one almost running out of gas on me. It was completely empty. So my test drive was very short for that reason. And I did inquire about this one. It was a little too much at the time. So the sales guy was, you know, the guy who I was talking to at this particular dealership, you know, kind of said, well, you know, what have you thought about leasing anything? And I was like, well, you know, not really. You know, I kind of didn't want to lease anything, but he did say at the time that they had these pretty good lease specials for the new Impalas. So he showed me a 2007 Chevy Impala. It was silver, black interior with like the faux wood, you know, across it. I mean, it was brand new. This one, however, did not have the center console. I remember it had the column shifter, so, you know, it was a bench seat up front, which I didn't even realize that they made until I saw it in person. But he gave me, you know, the opportunity to take this one out for a couple hours. So I signed a test drive agreement. You know, I drove it around, and when these things were brand new, this car was very, very comfortable, and it seemed like it was pretty powerful too. It had a new 3500 V6 under the hood, and it was overall just a really nice car, and I did become attached to it within a few hours. So I really was leaning more toward doing that. So when I took it back, you know, I dropped it back off, and you know, he was like, you know, telling me what I would have to have down and stuff for it to get the lease to where I want it to be. And I think the lease, I want to say it was around like $330 a month or something. So it really didn't seem that bad. The problem was trying to get there. And on top of that, I didn't have anything to trade because the Alero was just going to be given to my brother. The Lumina is not worth anything. It was just going to go to the junkyard once we had a car for my brother. So I kind of, lost hope of that. I was leaving the dealership that day, and once again, there was an Aztec that kind of had its nose poked out, from all the other cars, in the line. So I walked over to this Aztec. It was an 03. It was silver with gray interior, and that was the one that kind of really intrigued me a little bit. So when I went back and asked for the keys, he let me have it for the rest of the afternoon. And in the days to follow, that ended up being the car that I was able to get my, I was able to afford monthly. On top of that, I did ask my mom to, help me with my first loan again, and she agreed. And this was, at this point I had some of my own credit, and I was able to actually pull that one off. So yeah, my 03 Pontiac Aztec, that's how I found that one. Those were the cars that I found and were interested in before that one. And of course, that was the start of a beautiful relationship with me and my very first Aztec. So yet again, a couple of years had passed. We're in the year of 2010 at this point, and I almost had that impulsive buy, once again. Driving past the dealership, and on the front line of this dealership there was this Pontiac G6, and it was bright silver, and of course, it was a sunny day, so the sun is just shining down on this car. And now, I'm getting it in my head again, maybe it's time for something else, so I went to the dealership, and this G6 turned out to be a 2008 G6 GT. Boy, was this thing gorgeous. They let me take it home, for a few hours. I got this one on camera. I actually filmed this one when I brought it back to the apartment, so I still have the footage of it that I could show you here. But this thing was amazing. I wanted this one so badly, and granted, the Grand Am was always my favorite over top of the G6. There were still some variants of the G6 that were beautiful, and the GT, with this color and the silver wheels, or the chrome wheels, excuse me, it was all chrome. The interior was pretty much fully loaded. I don't think this one had the sunroof. It might be on the video, I don't know. It may have had a sunroof, but I don't think it had like that 4-panel sunroof or whatever they did, But regardless, this thing was just beautiful, and I decided that I wanted to have it. So I did take it back to the dealership, and the problem with that was the payments were going to be pretty high for what I was making at the time. Probably pretty feasible now, really, if I'm being honest. But this was, 15 years ago. But yeah, so payments would have been too high. They weren't willing to really give me enough trade on the Aztec for what I owed on it. So I would have been way upside down, as far as what I could have gotten for the Aztec, versus what I owed on it, and it just would have been a bad situation. So I had to walk away from that one, unfortunately, and that one was bad. That was a tough one because I really wanted that car. After driving it and having it in my possession for a little while, that was a tough one to take back. So I really wanted that one.
They handle so well, they're so sporty. They look good. and they feel good.
Woohoo! And then in 2011, I ended up buying the 2008 Pontiac Grand Prix. There's a whole video about that, on how I found that. But basically, I was filming for Mike's Vehicle Spotlight at the time and came across this Grand Prix. I looked at it at the dealership, drove it, decided that I wanted it. Plus, at this point in this time period of 2011, the Aztec started showing some iffy things here and there. As far as the transmission was starting to shift kind of weird between, I think it was first and second, or second and third. One of those two shift sequences had started to become a little concerning, and the heat, for some reason, I started losing heat periodically in the cabin. So I didn't know if a heater core was going out or what, but anyway, I decided it was time to let the Aztec go. Yet another move that I wish I didn't make, but at the same time, I did gain the Grand Prix, and the Grand Prix had served me well for about 4 years, I think, up until 2015. Didn't really look at anything in between there from my recollection. I pretty much just stayed with the Grand Prix, and then you know, when I decided that I wanted to go back to an SUV, I started looking for the Ford Escape of the second generation. So the only difference this time was I knew exactly what kind of Escape I wanted. You know, I wanted the steel blue, and it had to have black interior, and that was pretty much it. That was my criteria. So eventually I ended up coming across what would become my 2011 Ford Escape XLT. Once again, filming for Mike's Vehicle Spotlight at this Ford dealership, and this was it. This had the color that I wanted. It had the interior scheme that I wanted. Had a nice bundle of options for an XLT, and I was able to make that one work. So I bought my Escape. I sold the Grand Prix to my brother. He basically just took over whatever balance I had on the loan left, which was around $4,000, I think. So he, you know, was able to take a loan for that, and that's how he got that car. And then, you know, I had the Escape I had the Escape from 15 to 18. So yet again, not long enough. But I think the thing with the Escape was I just kind of started getting a little tired of, you know, driving, you know, like this felt like an SUV. You know, I kind of missed having the car, you know, sport type of feeling. And that's kind of when I decided to look for a Fusion. So I ended up looking, and I filmed this one too. We'll kind of look at some clips here, but I did look at a 2015 Ford Fusion SE, and this was a upscale SE. So it had, like, you know, the wood and the leather and just a whole bunch of nice stuff. It had the I think this one had the 2-liter EcoBoost engine, which out of all the EcoBoosts, I'm pretty sure the 2-liter has always been the best compared to the other ones, 4-cylinder wise. But this one was, and it was silver, and it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I stumbled across this one because I was working at the dealership taking pictures of these cars, and this was one of the ones that I ended up taking pictures of that day. So yet again, kind of fell into the problem of, you know, this is going to be out of my monthly payment range at the time, and I had to let that one go. Not too long after, the 15 Ford Fusion S, which I actually ended up buying, came in for, you know, to have pictures done. Had lower mileage, I'm pretty sure, compared to what the SE had on it, and I decided to buy the S trim Fusion, and boy, that was a wonderful car. Absolutely amazing car to have. Very comfortable. Looked good. I had no problems with that car. You know, nothing major anyway. It was just a wonderful car. And then now we fast forward to 2022 when I took a job at a Honda dealership and immediately fell in love with the Civics of the 10th generation. So, yeah, after about a month of working there, you know, I had serviced a 2017 Honda Civic LX, and this one came in. It was black. It was a disaster. It had scratches all over. It had stickers on the back of it. It was a mess. But the nice thing about this was, according to the Carfax, it had been serviced very well. You know, so it was due for some services while I was doing a used car inspection on it. So I performed these services, and everything else on the car checked out to be, you know, in great condition. It drove nice, and once the guys came in to kind of touch up the paint and stuff like that, it actually cleaned up pretty well also. But I liked driving the car, but I was like, we have another Civic on the lot, and I have pictures of it, but they're not here. They're on my other phone, which I use at work now, so it's at work. But I was eyeballing this 2019 Civic Sport that we had, and it was, you know, silver. Obviously, like I said, it was a Sport. Still had the 2-liter under the hood, so it wasn't the turbocharged one, but it obviously a couple of differences. You know, the tires were a little bit wider, and the way that the car handled, I mean, it had a tighter steering compared to like my LX. Had the touch screen, all the stuff. You know, it was beautiful car, and that was the one that I originally I wanted to go with. But therein, you know, the payments, especially in the market at the time, you know, when COVID was still kind of a thing, you know, I mean, the dealers were willing to pay you a lot for your trade, but in return, they're going to rake you through the coals as far as your buying experience financially. So this one was way out of the wallet, unfortunately. But, you know, I was like, darn, you know, I kind of, you know, really wanted a Civic at this point. I liked how they drove. I liked having the sport feeling. I also liked the fact that it was probably going to save me on gas, because the Fusion, even though it was just, you know, a 4-cylinder, where I was working now, there was a drastic change in the gas, you know, mileage of the Fusion. I was actually going through gas pretty, you know, I definitely noticed an uptick compared to like where I worked before. So I thought it would have been better to have something a little more fuel efficient. So I gave the black one a second chance, you know, the one that I had inspected and serviced and stuff. And you know, yeah, they let me drive it for a couple hours that night, and that's the one I ended up going with. You know, I really, you know, once I actually explored the car again and realized, you know, even though it's a base LX model, oh, it still has this, and this is fine. You know, I didn't need to have all the bells and whistles. The only thing that I didn't care for in the beginning was the fact that it was black and that it had the wheel covers. But everything else on the car, you know, I would have been completely happy with. Now, granted, I have grown to like the black exterior color, especially when it's clean. And the wheel covers, well, they are what they are, you know. I don't care about it so much nowadays, but yeah. So that's it. And you know, at this point, I haven't really looked at anything else. Nothing else has really gotten my attention. That's it. Those are pretty much all of the cars from memory that I have looked at, in between, you know, the cars that I have, you know, they've either led me to the cars that I've bought, have had, or like I said, it could have been just like an impulse thing, you know, at some point or another. But that's pretty much everything. And some of those choices could have been pretty bad in the long run, but for the most part, I think everything that I have purchased has been pretty fair to me so far at this point. Especially all the Fords have been really good to me. And the Civic, well, yeah, the Civic is on a whole other level. You know, 3.5 years at this point, pretty much, and just, you know, nothing but maintenances. Did a outer tie rod last year. Had to do the driver's outer tie rod last year, and I just put 4 tires on it finally a few weeks ago. So, but everything else, there's been no other issues, and I'm completely happy with that one. So that's all that I've got for today. Like I said, hope you guys enjoyed this. And hopefully all the pictures that I found, you know, in regards to all these cars kind of do what I actually looked at, you know, justice. But I think I did pretty well. I think I found quite a few decent pictures. That's it. Thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.